The wedding was the talk of the season, an event dripping with luxury and elegance. It took place at a sprawling estate surrounded by manicured gardens and sparkling fountains. The guest list included some of the wealthiest and most influential people in town: business tycoons, socialites, and prominent families, all gathered under one roof to celebrate the union of two privileged souls. Every detail had been meticulously planned, from the crystal chandeliers hanging above the dance floor to the imported flowers adorning each table. Nothing was left to chance. Among the army of staff working tirelessly behind the scenes was Marcus, a skilled caterer whose culinary expertise had earned him a reputation for excellence. Despite his talent, Marcus stood out, not because of his skills, but because of the color of his skin. As he moved gracefully between tables, ensuring every guest received their perfectly plated meals, he couldn't help but notice the subtle glances and quiet whispers directed his way. Some guests openly stared, sizing him up as though trying to figure out why someone like him would be allowed into such an exclusive setting. At first, Marcus tried to brush it off, focusing instead on the task at hand. His team worked seamlessly, delivering dish after dish with precision. The appetizers were met with murmurs of approval, the main course elicited nods of satisfaction, and yet none of that seemed to matter to certain individuals in the room. One woman wrinkled her nose when Marcus leaned over to refill her glass of champagne, while another man muttered something about people knowing their place. Though these comments weren't loud enough to cause a scene, they stung nonetheless. But it wasn't just the looks or muttered words, it was the assumptions. Marcus could almost hear what they were thinking. How did he end up here? Does he even belong? These unspoken questions hung heavy in the air, creating an invisible barrier between him and the guests. Still, Marcus kept his head high. He reminded himself why he was there: to do his job, and do it well. This wasn't the first time he'd faced judgment, and it wouldn't be the last. What mattered most was proving, through his work, that he deserved to be exactly where he was. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere grew livelier. Guests laughed, danced, and toasted to the happy couple, seemingly oblivious to the tension simmering beneath the surface. But Marcus noticed everything: the clinking of glasses, the forced smiles, the way some people avoided making eye contact with him altogether. Yet amidst the sea of disdain, there were also moments of kindness. A young boy tugged at his mother's sleeve and said, "This food is amazing." Another guest gave Marcus a warm smile and whispered, "Thank you for everything you're doing tonight." These small acts of gratitude reminded Marcus that not everyone judged him based on preconceived notions. They fueled his determination to push through the negativity and focus on the joyous occasion unfolding around him. Little did he know, however, that this night would take an unexpected turn, one that would challenge the very people who doubted him and leave a lasting impression on everyone present. As the evening unfolded, the tension in the air became harder to ignore. Marcus continued to move through the crowd with practiced ease, his movements calm and deliberate despite the undercurrent of hostility. He knew how to navigate situations like this, how to smile politely when someone looked at him with thinly veiled disdain, how to maintain composure when snide remarks floated past him. But tonight felt different. The mocking had grown louder, more pointed, as if some guests were emboldened by their surroundings. It was during dessert service that things reached a boiling point. Charles, a tall man with slicked back hair and an expensive suit, stood near the buffet table chatting with a group of friends. His voice carried over the soft hum of conversation, sharp and cutting. "You know," he said, raising his glass slightly as if making a toast, "I'm surprised they let his kind handle something this important. Isn't catering usually beneath them?" His friends chuckled awkwardly, though it was clear not all of them found his comment amusing. Marcus froze for a split second, his tray of desserts hovering midair. He'd been close enough to hear every word, and while part of him wanted to walk away and pretend nothing happened, another part bristled at the insult. Beneath the surface, anger simmered, but Marcus pushed it down. He couldn't afford to lose control. Not here, not now. Instead, he straightened his posture and continued serving, refusing to give Charles the satisfaction of seeing him rattled. The comment didn't go unnoticed by others either. A few tables away, Emily, a distant cousin of the bride, watched the exchange with growing discomfort. She had seen Marcus earlier in the evening, quietly overseeing the catering team with professionalism and care. To her, he seemed like someone who took immense pride in his work, someone who didn't deserve to be treated so poorly. Charles's words struck her as cruel and unnecessary, and she couldn't understand why anyone would speak that way about someone simply doing their job. Meanwhile, other guests began picking up on the negativity. Whispers spread like wildfire across the room. One woman leaned toward her husband and whispered, "Do you think he's even qualified for this? I mean, look at him." Another guest nodded along, adding, "Maybe that's why the chicken tasted a little dry." These comments, though quieter than Charles's outburst, cut just as deeply. They painted Marcus not as a professional providing a service, but as an outsider who didn't belong in their world. Despite the mounting criticism, Marcus refused to let it show. Inside, however, he felt the weight of their words pressing down on him. Each snicker, each glance, reminded him of battles he thought he'd left behind. The times he'd fought to prove himself in an industry dominated by people who didn't look like him. Tonight wasn't supposed to be one of those nights. He'd worked hard to build his reputation, earning praise from clients far more prestigious than the ones gathered here. Yet, standing among these people, he felt reduced to a stereotype, judged before he'd even opened his mouth. Still, there were moments of light amid the darkness. As Marcus made his rounds, refilling drinks and clearing plates, he caught glimpses of appreciation from certain guests. An elderly couple thanked him warmly for his attentiveness, saying, "We've never had such wonderful service at a wedding before." A young woman with a kind smile complimented the presentation of the desserts, calling them works of art. These interactions, though brief, reminded Marcus that not everyone in the room shared Charles's narrow-minded views. But the damage had been done. The mocking remarks lingered in the air, casting a shadow over what should have been a joyful celebration. For Marcus, the rest of the evening stretched ahead like a gauntlet, one he would have to face with grace and resilience. Little did he know, help was closer than he realized. Across the room, Emily sat quietly, observing everything. Her eyes narrowed thoughtfully as she considered the injustice unfolding before her. Something inside her stirred, a quiet determination to set things right. And unbeknownst to Marcus, this decision would change the course of the night, and perhaps the lives of everyone involved. As the evening wore on, Marcus found himself gravitating toward the few guests who had shown him kindness. Among them was Emily, a woman whose warm smile and genuine demeanor stood out in a room filled with pretense. She wasn't dressed as extravagantly as some of the other guests, nor did she carry herself with the same air of superiority. Instead, she seemed approachable, almost refreshingly ordinary in a sea of opulence. Emily approached Marcus during a brief lull in the festivities, just as he was overseeing the dessert service. "Excuse me," she said softly, her tone polite but curious. "I just wanted to say how incredible everything has been tonight. The food is absolutely delicious." Her words were simple, but they carried a sincerity that made Marcus pause. For a moment, he forgot about the earlier insults and allowed himself to feel a flicker of pride. "Thank you," Marcus replied with a small smile. "I'm glad you're enjoying it." Emily hesitated for a second before continuing. "If you don't mind me asking, how did you get into catering? It's clearly a passion for you." Her question caught Marcus off guard, not because it was unusual, but because it came from someone who genuinely seemed interested in his story. Most people only cared about the end result, the beautifully plated dishes or the flawless execution, but rarely did anyone ask about the journey behind it all. Sensing her sincerity, Marcus decided to share a little more. "I grew up in a neighborhood where opportunities weren't exactly handed to you," he began, his voice steady but tinged with reflection. "But I always loved cooking. It was something my mom taught me when I was young. When I got older, I worked multiple jobs to save up for culinary school. It wasn't easy, but I knew what I wanted, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me. Emily listened intently, her expression softening as Marcus spoke. "That's amazing," she said finally. "You've built something truly special here. People should know your story. It's inspiring." Marcus chuckled lightly, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "Not everyone sees it that way," he admitted, glancing briefly toward Charles's corner of the room. "Some people, well, let's just say they've already made up their minds about me." Emily followed his gaze and frowned. She had witnessed firsthand the dismissive remarks and condescending attitudes, and it infuriated her. How could anyone judge someone so harshly without knowing anything about them? Determination sparked within her. "Would you mind if I shared your story?" she asked suddenly, surprising even herself with the boldness of her suggestion. Marcus raised an eyebrow, unsure of what she meant. "Shared it? With who?" Emily gestured subtly toward the microphone set up near the dance floor. "During the final toast. I think people need to hear it. They need to understand who you are and what you've accomplished. Maybe then they'll realize how wrong they've been." For a moment, Marcus didn't respond. The idea of having his personal struggles laid bare in front of these judgmental strangers felt daunting, even humiliating. What if they dismissed it altogether? What if it made things worse? But then he looked at Emily, whose earnest expression radiated nothing but good intentions. He could see she believed in him, and maybe, just maybe, sharing his story could make a difference. "I trust you," Marcus said finally, nodding slowly. "If you think it'll help, go ahead. Just be careful, okay?" Emily smiled, relief washing over her. "I promise, you won't regret this." As she walked away, Marcus couldn't shake the mix of nerves and hope swirling inside him. He didn't know what would come next, but one thing was certain. Emily's determination to stand up for him reminded him that kindness still existed, even in places where it seemed scarce. And perhaps, just perhaps, her words might change the hearts of those who had doubted him. While the guests mingled and enjoyed the final courses of the meal, Marcus retreated to the kitchen for a brief moment of respite. The Grand Estate's kitchen was a flurry of activity, chefs plating desserts, servers lining up trays, and assistants rushing back and forth. Amidst the controlled chaos, Marcus leaned against a counter, allowing himself a rare moment to breathe. He glanced at his reflection in a stainless steel surface, straightening his tie and smoothing out his jacket. For all his composure, he couldn't ignore the weight of the evening pressing down on him. As he stood there collecting his thoughts, he overheard snippets of conversation drifting in from the main hall. The double doors leading to the dining area were slightly ajar, and though the voices were muffled, their tone was unmistakable, condescending, mocking, dismissive. Charles's voice carried louder than most, his laughter sharp and grating. "Honestly," he said, "I don't care how good the food is. Some things just shouldn't mix with events like this." Marcus clenched his jaw, but forced himself not to react. Instead, he focused on the sounds of the kitchen, the rhythmic chopping of knives, the sizzle of caramelized sugar, the quiet hum of teamwork. These familiar noises grounded him, reminding him of why he loved what he did. But even as he tried to block out the negativity, fragments of other conversations seeped through. One woman whispered, "Did you see how he was dressed? Not exactly fitting for a wedding like this." Another guest chimed in, "Well, maybe that's why the service felt so off." Each comment stung, not because they were true, but because they revealed how quickly people judged based on appearances. To them, Marcus wasn't a skilled professional running a successful business. He was an outsider who didn't belong. Despite the sting, Marcus refused to let bitterness take hold. He reminded himself that he'd faced worse challenges before. Building his catering company hadn't been easy. It had taken years of sacrifice, hard work, and resilience. If anything, nights like these only reinforced why he kept pushing forward. He wanted to prove, not just to others, but to himself, that he could rise above prejudice and succeed on his own terms. Meanwhile, Emily was quietly gathering ammunition. She moved through the crowd with purpose, engaging in casual conversations while subtly steering them toward Marcus's story. "Did you know he started with nothing?" she asked one guest, her tone light but deliberate. "Worked 3 jobs to get through culinary school. Now he runs one of the best catering companies in the city." The guest looked surprised, glancing toward Marcus with newfound curiosity. Emily repeated variations of this story to several people, planting seeds of awareness. She knew she couldn't change everyone's mindset overnight, but if enough people heard the truth, it might soften the hostility in the room. As she worked, she kept one eye on Marcus, watching as he navigated the space with quiet dignity. His professionalism never wavered, even when faced with thinly veiled insults or disdainful stares. Back in the kitchen, Marcus noticed something unexpected. A few guests had begun approaching him directly to compliment the food. One man shook his hand firmly, saying, "This salmon is incredible. You must have trained under some real masters." A young couple thanked him for the flawless execution of the meal, calling it the highlight of the evening. These small acts of appreciation meant more than they realized, serving as reminders that not everyone shared Charles's narrow-minded views. Still, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that the night wasn't over yet. Something was brewing, something beyond the polite exchanges and carefully plated desserts. Emily's earlier request lingered in his mind. Would she really go through with sharing his story during the final toast? And if she did, how would the room react? For now, Marcus pushed those questions aside, focusing instead on finishing the evening strong. He checked each dessert station, ensured every server had their assignments, and made sure everything ran smoothly. Yet beneath his calm exterior, anticipation simmered. Whatever happened next, he knew it would leave a lasting impression, not just on him, but on everyone present. The grand hall buzzed with energy as the speeches began, signaling the start of the formal program. The father of the bride took the stage first, his voice filled with emotion as he spoke about love, family, and the joy of seeing his daughter find her perfect match. His words were heartfelt, drawing laughter and even a few tears from the audience. Next came the best man, whose humorous anecdotes about the groom had everyone chuckling, temporarily easing the tension that had lingered throughout the evening. As the applause died down, Emily stepped forward, her presence commanding attention without being overbearing. She carried herself with quiet confidence, smoothing her dress as she approached the microphone. The room fell silent, anticipation hanging thick in the air. Marcus watched from the sidelines, his heart pounding. He had no idea what Emily planned to say, but he trusted her intentions. Still, nerves prickled at the back of his neck as all eyes turned toward her. "Thank you," Emily began, her voice steady and warm. "Before I say anything else, I want to take a moment to thank the happy couple for bringing us together tonight. Weddings are a celebration of love, commitment, and unity, values we should all strive to embody in our own lives." Her opening remarks earned polite nods and smiles, setting a reflective tone for what was to come. "But there's another kind of unity I'd like to talk about tonight," she continued, pausing briefly to let her words sink in. "It's the unity of recognizing each other's humanity, of looking beyond appearances and assumptions to see the person standing right in front of us." A murmur rippled through the crowd, curiosity piqued by her unexpected turn. Emily gestured subtly toward the kitchen area where Marcus stood, though she didn't name him yet. Tonight, many of us have enjoyed an incredible meal prepared with skill, care, and dedication. But how many of us stopped to think about the person behind it? How many of us considered the journey they took to be here? She paused again, scanning the room. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned forward, intrigued. Charles raised an eyebrow, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. Whatever Emily was doing, it clearly wasn't part of the usual wedding script. "Let me tell you about someone who deserves our admiration tonight," Emily said, her voice growing firmer. This person grew up in a neighborhood where opportunities were scarce, but their passion for cooking gave them hope. They worked multiple jobs to afford culinary school, sacrificing comfort and security to chase a dream. Today, they run one of the most respected catering companies in the city, a testament to their hard work, resilience, and talent. By now, the entire room was captivated. Even those who had mocked Marcus earlier found themselves listening intently, unsure of where this was heading but unable to look away. Emily's words painted a vivid picture of struggle and triumph, qualities anyone could respect. And yet, she added softly, her gaze sweeping across the audience, despite everything they've achieved, they still face judgment, not for their abilities or their character, but for things they can't control. Tonight, some of us made assumptions about this person, dismissing them before giving them a chance. But if we look closer, we'll see that their story is one of courage, a reminder that greatness often comes wrapped in unexpected packages. The weight of her message hung heavy in the air. Guests exchanged glances, some looking guilty, others thoughtful. Marcus felt a lump rise in his throat as he realized Emily was speaking directly to the prejudices he'd faced that very night. Though he hadn't asked for this moment, it was impossible not to feel moved by her bravery. As Emily wrapped up her speech, she turned to Marcus and offered him a small, encouraging smile. So tonight, let's raise a glass not just to the happy couple, but to the unsung heroes among us, the ones who remind us that true success is built on perseverance, kindness, and the ability to rise above adversity. The room erupted into applause, though it was tinged with unease. For Marcus, the spotlight was both thrilling and terrifying. Little did he know, the real impact of Emily's words was only beginning to unfold. The applause that followed Emily's toast was hesitant at first, a mix of admiration for her eloquence and discomfort over the truths she had laid bare. Some guests clapped politely, their faces unreadable masks, while others stared at Marcus with newfound curiosity, or perhaps guilt. The room felt charged, as though Emily's words had cracked open a door that many would have preferred to keep closed. For a moment, there was an awkward silence, broken only by the lingering echo of clapping hands. Charles, seated near the front, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His earlier smugness had vanished, replaced by a flicker of unease. He glanced around the room, gauging the reactions of those nearby. A few people avoided his gaze entirely, while others exchanged meaningful looks, silently acknowledging the weight of what Emily had said. It was clear that her speech had struck a nerve, not just with him, but with everyone who had contributed to the subtle hostility Marcus had endured throughout the evening. Marcus himself remained frozen in place, unsure of how to react. He hadn't expected this kind of public acknowledgement, let alone one so raw and unflinching. Part of him wanted to step back into the shadows, to retreat to the safety of the kitchen, where he could focus on finishing the night without drawing further attention. But another part of him, the part that had worked tirelessly to build his business and earn respect, felt a spark of pride. Emily's words weren't just about him. They were a challenge to everyone present, a call to look beyond surface-level judgments and recognize the humanity in others. As the initial shock began to wear off, something remarkable happened. One by one, guests started approaching Marcus, not with condescension or mockery, but with genuine gratitude. An older man walked over, extending his hand. "I had no idea," he said simply, his voice tinged with regret. "Your food has been outstanding, and your story, well, it's inspiring." A young woman followed, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry if I came across as rude earlier," she admitted. "I didn't know anything about you, and I should have given you the benefit of the doubt. Please accept my apology." Each interaction chipped away at the invisible barrier that had separated Marcus from the guests all evening. Some apologies were heartfelt, others more perfunctory, but each one carried a kernel of redemption. Even Charles eventually made his way over, though he looked visibly uncomfortable. "Look," he muttered, avoiding direct eye contact. I may have said some things earlier that weren't fair. I apologize." Marcus regarded him for a long moment, weighing his response. There was sincerity in Charles's tone, but also a hint of reluctance, as if apologizing was almost as difficult for him as facing prejudice had been for Marcus. Finally, Marcus nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said evenly. "Apology accepted." While not every guest approached him, the shift in energy was undeniable. The room seemed lighter, less burdened by the prejudices that had simmered beneath the surface earlier. People began mingling more freely, their conversations shifting from gossip and judgment to genuine connection. Emily watched from afar, a satisfied smile playing on her lips. She hadn't done this for glory or recognition. She'd done it because it was the right thing to do. And seeing the ripple effect of her words filled her with quiet pride. For Marcus, the transformation was bittersweet. On one hand, he appreciated the outpouring of support and the belated recognition of his hard work. On the other hand, he couldn't help but wonder why it had taken a public speech to make people see him clearly. Still, he chose to focus on the positives, the fact that change, however small, was possible. By standing tall and refusing to let negativity define him, he had inspired someone else to speak up on his behalf. As the evening drew to a close, Marcus took a deep breath, feeling a sense of closure wash over him. This wasn't the end of his journey, it was just another chapter. But thanks to Emily's courage and his own resilience, it was a chapter marked not by bitterness, but by growth. And as he glanced around the room one last time, he realized something important. Sometimes, the hardest battles lead to the most meaningful victories. As the wedding celebration wound down, Marcus found himself reflecting on the whirlwind of emotions he'd experienced that evening. The apologies and compliments from the guests had been unexpected, yet they carried a weight that went beyond mere words. Each acknowledgement felt like a small victory, not just for him, but for everyone who had ever been judged unfairly. Still, Marcus couldn't shake the lingering sense of irony. It shouldn't have taken a public toast to make people see his worth, yet here he was, standing in the glow of newfound respect. Charles's apology, though begrudging, lingered in Marcus's mind. He knew it wasn't easy for someone like Charles, someone accustomed to privilege and power, to admit fault. But Marcus also recognized that true redemption required more than just saying sorry. It demanded action. Would Charles walk away from this night with a changed perspective, or would he simply return to his old ways once the spotlight faded? Only time would tell. For now, Marcus chose to accept the gesture graciously, knowing that forgiveness was as much about freeing himself as it was about offering grace to others. The atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically since Emily's speech. Conversations that had once revolved around superficial topics now leaned toward deeper reflections. One guest approached Marcus to ask how long he'd been in business, expressing interest in hiring him for an upcoming corporate event. Another mentioned wanting to share his story with friends who might need catering services. These exchanges weren't just professional leads, they were validations of Marcus's hard work and resilience. Emily, too, became a focal point for many guests. Several people thanked her for her boldness, admitting they hadn't realized how their biases had influenced their behavior earlier in the evening. "You opened my eyes tonight," one woman confessed, her voice tinged with regret. "I'll think twice before making assumptions about anyone again." Others echoed similar sentiments, praising Emily for using her platform to highlight an important truth. Despite the progress made, Marcus understood that not everyone would leave the wedding with a transformed mindset. Some guests still clung to their preconceived notions, even if they were too polite to voice them aloud. That realization didn't discourage him, though. It motivated him. If anything, it reinforced his belief in the importance of leading by example. Every dish he prepared, every client he served, was an opportunity to challenge stereotypes and inspire change. As the final guests began departing, Marcus took a moment to step outside into the cool night air. The estate's gardens were bathed in soft moonlight, their beauty untouched by the drama of the evening. Leaning against a railing, he allowed himself to exhale fully for the first time all night. This wasn't the first obstacle he'd faced, and it wouldn't be the last. Yet each challenge taught him something valuable, not just about others, but about himself. A short while later, Emily joined him outside, her heels clicking softly against the stone pathway. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently, her expression warm and concerned. Marcus smiled faintly. "Better than I thought I would," he admitted. "Tonight, it wasn't easy, but I think it meant something. To me, at least." "It meant something to a lot of people," Emily replied firmly. "You reminded everyone here what it means to overcome adversity, and to do it with dignity. That's powerful." Her words resonated deeply, filling Marcus with a quiet sense of pride. He didn't seek validation from others, but hearing Emily articulate the impact of his journey gave him renewed strength. As they stood together under the stars, Marcus realized that this night wasn't just about triumphing over prejudice, it was about connection. In sharing his story, he had forged bonds with strangers who might never have noticed him otherwise. When Emily finally excused herself to head home, Marcus returned inside to oversee the cleanup process. His team worked efficiently, packing up equipment and ensuring no detail was overlooked. As he surveyed the nearly empty hall, Marcus felt a profound sense of closure. The evening had tested him, humbled him, and ultimately uplifted him. And as he switched off the lights and locked the doors behind him, he carried with him not just the memories of the night, but the knowledge that change, no matter how small, was always possible. As Marcus drove home that night, the quiet hum of his car's engine provided a soothing backdrop to his racing thoughts. The road ahead was dark, illuminated only by the soft glow of streetlights and the occasional flash of headlights from passing vehicles. But in his mind, the evening replayed vividly, the laughter, the tension, the unexpected turn of events, and finally, the moments of redemption. It had been a roller coaster of emotions, one that left him both drained and invigorated. He thought about Emily first, her courage standing out like a beacon in an otherwise dim room. She hadn't known him before tonight, yet she'd chosen to stand up for him when no one else did. Her actions reminded Marcus of something important. Kindness often starts with a single person willing to speak up. He made a mental note to reach out to her later, not just to thank her again, but to express how much her gesture meant to him. In a world where people so often turned a blind eye to injustice, Emily had proven that empathy could still shine through. The drive gave Marcus time to reflect on the guests who had approached him after Emily's speech. Some apologies had felt genuine, while others seemed more performative, a way to ease their own guilt rather than truly understand his experience. Yet Marcus didn't dwell on the differences. What mattered most was that they had taken a step toward acknowledging their biases. Change rarely happened overnight, but every small effort counted. If even one person walked away from the wedding vowing to be more mindful, then the night had served a greater purpose. His phone buzzed as he pulled into his driveway, breaking the silence. A quick glance revealed several notifications, texts and emails flooding in from contacts he hadn't expected to hear from. One message stood out: a potential client interested in booking his services for a high-profile charity gala. "Your story inspired me tonight," the email read. "We'd love to work with someone as talented and resilient as you." Marcus stared at the screen for a moment, a slow smile spreading across his face. This wasn't just another job lead. It was validation that his perseverance was paying off. Inside his house, Marcus kicked off his shoes and sank onto the couch, letting the weight of the day settle around him. He thought about the young boy who had complimented his food earlier, the elderly couple who had thanked him warmly, and the other guests who had shown glimpses of kindness despite the negativity. Those moments reminded him why he loved what he did. Food brought people together. It transcended boundaries, bridged divides, and created connections where none seemed possible. And tonight, it had done exactly that. But perhaps the most profound realization came not from the compliments or business leads, but from within himself. Marcus understood now, more clearly than ever, that his journey wasn't just about success or recognition. It was about resilience, the ability to rise above prejudice, to keep moving forward even when the odds felt stacked against him. Tonight had tested that resilience, and he had emerged stronger for it. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through his windows, Marcus woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. He spent the day responding to inquiries, finalizing plans for upcoming events, and brainstorming ideas to expand his catering business. Each task felt lighter, infused with the energy of newfound confidence. He also reached out to Emily, inviting her to lunch as a token of gratitude. Over coffee and sandwiches, they talked about life, dreams, and the power of storytelling. Their connection deepened, turning what could have been a fleeting interaction into a lasting friendship. In the weeks that followed, Marcus noticed subtle changes, not just in his professional life, but in his outlook. The wedding had reminded him of the importance of staying true to himself, no matter the challenges he faced. It had also shown him that while he couldn't control how others treated him, he could choose how he responded, with grace, dignity, and unwavering determination. As he stood in his kitchen one evening, preparing a meal for friends, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet pride. Life wasn't perfect, and there would always be obstacles to overcome. But tonight, surrounded by warmth and laughter, he knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. The road ahead might still hold its share of difficulties, but Marcus faced it with hope, knowing that every challenge was an opportunity to grow and to inspire others along the way.